before a trial, when you're looking at evidence and potentially evidence that maybe something that should be suppressed, what are some red flags or indicators that might suggest that evidence had been either illegally obtained or maybe tampered with?
With every piece of evidence, we need to vet it very carefully. It's a very thorough analysis we have to do. So if it's a statement of an accused, I want to look at what's his GT score, what's his ASVAB score, how old is the accused, does he have any mental health issues, what type of mental health issues does he have, what else was going on in his life or her life at the time, how long was the interview, what were the conditions of the interview, during the interview, what tactics were used by law enforcement. We see tactics that are used by law enforcement all the time. A common one is they'll spend 10, 15 minutes doing what I call, now I'm going to air quote here, rapport building. And before they ever read you your rights, these agents are going to come in and talk about your background, find out if you like cars, if you like sports, if you like gaming. And then no matter what you like, they're going to like it too. So if you are a gamer, guess what? They're going to be a gamer too. Guess what? If you like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're the biggest Bucs fans from the days of Bucko Bruce. If you like JDM cars, then they had a Skyline when they were growing up. They're going to lie to you, and they're going to build this rapport and make you think they are your friends. And they're going to do this for 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes before they ever advise you of your rights. And so this is problematic because they need to be advising of you of your rights immediately and not do this bullshit rapport building in order to get people to waive their rights. And then what they'll typically say is instead of just reading them their rights, or Article 31 Bravo rights, which are similar to Miranda, the standard issue, you have a right to remain silent, you have a right to an attorney, those rights, what they're going to do is say, listen, we're not accusing you of anything. You're suspected. And there's two sides to every story. We really want to get your side of the story here. And so we'd really like to sit down and talk with you. And they'll give you all the reasons why it sounds like a great idea to make a statement and to waive your rights. And what we look at is when that happens, we want to look very carefully at the rights advisement. Very, very carefully. Was the rights advisement done properly? Was it done in writing? Was it recorded? Once someone asked for a lawyer, did they actually get a lawyer? And I've seen cases where someone has asked for a lawyer, but maybe they didn't use the magic words and the government just runs roughshod right over them. They'll say, yeah, I think I do need a lawyer here. And as soon as you say, I need a lawyer here, the government has an obligation to stop all questions. You're unequivocally asking for an attorney. What these agents will do is say, well, once the attorneys get involved, we can't help you. And, once you speak to an attorney, I'm not able to get your side of the story. And I've got to go back and tell the command that you're a predator. I've got to tell the command that you're sexual, that they have someone that's, preying on women or, a rapist amongst them. And I got to tell them not only are you a potential rapist, but you don't even have integrity to speak with us. And so that all of that's illegal. It is once someone asks, has a constitutional right to ask for an attorney or to have an attorney present, these NCIS agents or these CID agents blow right through it. And then oftentimes they will say, listen, you can always ask for a lawyer later. We just want to get your side of the story. It is incredibly common. And so when I see that, we're filing a motion. Like we are filing a motion to suppress because what these agents did is violate this Marines or this service members' right under Article 31 Bravo of the UCMJ. And it's a constitutional right to have an attorney present. And these agents should know better. And that is oftentimes intentional. So I'm looking at that very carefully. If someone does waive their rights and says they want to speak, then I want to look at the length of the interview, what tactics were used. Oftentimes we see things like minimization. They'll use what's called the Reid Technique. It's REID, the Reid Technique. You can learn all about it and see how it oftentimes leads to false confessions. And let's say you have a sexual assault case, they will give you two false options and have you choose one of two false options. And they'll say things like, they'll build this rapport. It takes hours to do this, but they'll do it. They'll sit really close to you. It's like going to Vegas. There's no clocks in the casinos. You don't know the way out. It's a small little room and you can't leave. And they'll say, listen, we think you're potentially a monster. We think that there's one individual who's accused you of sexual assault, but we believe that you've sexually assaulted a lot of soldiers. We believe that there's many soldiers that you've done this to. Do you have a pattern of doing this? We've got to tell your commanding officer that you are a serial sexual assaulter and that you don't have the integrity to tell us. And they'll start denying that, right? No, I'm not. I didn't do that. And these agents know there's not multiple victims. There's one accuser, but they'll make up these lies. And then they'll give the false they'll give the other option and say, well, listen, maybe you're not a monster here. Maybe we've seen monsters before in this office. Maybe you're not a monster. Maybe you're just someone who made a mistake. And so I've got to tell your CO one of two things, either that I've got some sexual deviant who's out there preying on soldiers and doesn't have integrity and probably needs to be locked up for a long time, or I've got a soldier who just made a one-time mistake. And we can fix this. So Was it just a one-time mistake that you made? And they will often say, well, yeah, it was just a one-time mistake. And then once that happens, and they'll go into what the mistake was, and they'll get someone to make an admission to something they didn't do. And you may watch this sitting and say, well, that would never happen to me. Well, everyone says that until it does. Oftentimes, these are young kids right out of high school. They're 18, 19, 20 years old. They don't have a lot of life experience. They have no usually prior records. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the military if they had a prior history. Simply the first time dealing with law enforcement, they get brought into a room and they're taught right out of basic or AIT or brand new into the fleet. They're taught to, respect authority, and that they've got to essentially listen to what the command is telling them to do. And so you'd be surprised at how many individuals make statements that we can verifiably show are false. And so I've seen countless statements. I mean, dozens upon dozens upon dozens of statements where I've had a young soldier or a young service member, quote, confess to a crime, and then later I can prove with DNA evidence that they didn't commit. I mean, I did this in a trial earlier this summer where I had a quote admission that came into evidence, and we were able to prove through DNA that it didn't happen, or we're able to prove that then all of a sudden, then what happens is, because these CID agents are feeding them what to say, now an accused or a defendant statement doesn't even match up with what the victim statement says. So you have a victim saying one thing happened, you have an accused saying something different happened, and so who the hell do you believe? And then next thing you know, the victim changes her story to his, and it becomes an absolute disaster because these agents just don't do the right thing. It goes back to if you're a good law enforcement agent, you'll use the appropriate tools at your disposal to, number one, determine if a crime occurred. And if a crime did occur, then you want a valid confession. But these agents they just want a confession. They don't give a shit if it's true or not. They just want a confession so they can close their case out and deal with it later. And nowhere I've seen this more so than in the military. So we're looking for that. If you're a military service member and you've already made a statement, or you've given an admission or a confession that isn't true, or you've had a cell phone seized, or there's evidence that looks damning on its face that you think is going to be used against you at trial, let me tell you what, all hope is not lost. You still can fight this. You can still take this case to trial, and it can still be won. Give me a call at 813-669-3500, or do additional research at my website, BileckiLawGroup.com, and get us into the fight.